Welcome back to the State of the Race. I'm Casey Hunt. We're live in Washington. It is the first Friday in November, which means that next week brings the first Tuesday in November, which means voters are voting. Here's a look at some of the issues that are going to be on the ballot next week in Ohio. Issue 1 is a ballot measure to enshrine abortion rights in the state's constitution. In Virginia, abortion is effectively on the ballot. If reporters there give Republicans total control of the legislature, they would likely ban abortion in the last southern state where women can legally get one. And governor's races are taking place in Kentucky and Mississippi. My panel is back with me to talk more about this. So, Karen, I mean, this is a situation where, honestly, I think the thing we're going to be talking about the most is going to be the issue of abortion, because this has been something that has really swept through the voting public in a way that I think took even, I mean, I know I certainly talked to a lot of people in your party who said this is going to be a big deal, this is going to be a big deal. It was an even bigger deal, I think. And even in some of these red states, voters rejected bans on abortion. What is your sense of where the electorate stands, and is that still kind of at the forefront here?
As an issue, it continues to be at the forefront. It's interesting. NARAL, Pro-Choice America, now Reproductive Freedom for All, have conducted polling right after 2022, and it showed that about 80% of Americans were concerned that a Republican Congress would pass more restrictive measures. And if you think about that in the context of what we've seen happen in these special elections where voters are clearly saying we want to protect Roe v. Wade and reproductive freedom, part of what's working in the electorate is both the desire to protect reproductive rights, but a fear, exactly what you said in your intro, of what Republicans would do, whether it is in the state legislature, whether it is in Congress, in terms of restricting those rights. And so I think we're going to see it's going to be a mobilizing issue next week in Virginia, in Ohio, possibly also in places like Mississippi and Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge obviously is always that, and we've seen when it's an up or down test on an issue, voters are in one place. When it's a test in terms of candidates, it becomes more complicated because then you have to vote for a person. You don't exactly know what the person's going to do. Glenn Youngkin, governor of Virginia, was on Fox News this morning talking about what's going to happen in his state. There's a lot of speculation about what Youngkin himself might do in the wake of these elections. But here's what he had to say about how he thinks things are going to play out in Virginia.
Well, we have a ton of momentum going into the final day of voting on Tuesday. And you're exactly right. Just 24 months ago, Virginia was totally controlled by the progressive left, and the state was lost. And in 24 short months, I believe common sense conservative policies have allowed it to be found. We are going to hold our House and flip our Senate. But these races are incredibly tight.
So, Matt Mowers, you see a lot of kind of internal polling and data that kind of rolls through. What's your sense of what's going to happen in Virginia? Which way is the wind blowing in these final days before the election?
Well, if you look at any of the numbers, I was talking to Governor Youngkin's team earlier today, actually, about those elections. The top issues you're seeing voters actually concerned about are the same things you're seeing in national surveys. You're seeing them care about the economy. You see them caring about crime. And a lot of them are still talking about immigration, giving the images they see of the humanitarian crisis on the southern border, more so than abortion. Now, Governor Youngkin's actually been forward-leaning and said, you know what, I want to tell you where my position is on abortion. We are going to have restrictions after the first trimester, but we're not going to do anything in the first trimester. And they believe that that is a winning issue and solution for a lot of these suburban voters to say that's a common position amongst these voters on abortion, that there should be restrictions after the first trimester. But ultimately, it's still the pocketbook issues, not to mention the fact that these Democratic governors, as well as Joe Biden, have terrible approval ratings in these swing districts. I looked at a poll out of South Jersey last week. It's a Democratic-leaning district traditionally. Joe Biden is upside down by 16 points. 16 points in that district right now. Trump is only upside down by 6 points in his favorable rating. It shows you where the political winds are blowing right now.
Furnish, are you picking up any of that in your conversations with members of Congress?
I mean, I think abortion for Democrats they've known that this is bad for Republicans. And the more that they push it, obviously now they have a speaker who is, very vocal about his anti-abortion stance. So they see this as a winning thing for them next year. And so many of the other issues kind of fall pale to abortion for Democrats. Like, they know that if Republicans push it, they can push the issue and win back the House next year.
Right. So obviously the House is going to be on the ballot next year. So obviously is the presidential race. That is our 367-day away election today. And really the narrative right now is kind of the rise of Nikki Haley in the battle for second place. It's enough that the man who has stood in first place all the way along has started to notice. How do you know that Donald Trump has noticed you? Take a look at what he had to say about Nikki Haley.
The people in Iowa, they get it, and we're up, way up. We have competition that's not so good there, or anywhere else for that matter. You see where Ron DeSanctimonious is now in third place? Can you imagine? Bird Brain is number 2, Bird Brain.
You know you're doing well when you get a nickname. Come on, Casey.
Yes, you do. Right, and I'm flashing back to that. You remember they put a bird cage outside of her hotel room in Iowa. Matt Mowers, is this a real thing, this battle for second place? And let's talk about Nikki Haley, too, and what she's doing.
It's still early. If you look at early state polling in particular, Iowa and New Hampshire specifically, you have a majority of voters who say they can actually change their mind by the time the caucus or the primary comes along. We see that every 4 to 8 years, and that often does happen. And it's actually very difficult to figure out exactly what the electorate's going to be in a lot of these early states, in particular New Hampshire, because you really don't have competition, no offense to Dean Phillips and Joe Biden, on the Democratic side in New Hampshire. So if you're an independent in a state like New Hampshire, there's one show in town, which is the Republican primary. How that's going to change the makeup of the electorate, no one's going to be able to put their finger on the pulse of that probably until about the weekend or a week out from the election in January.
What is your take on Nikki Haley's rise here?
You know, we've talked about this. I think what's interesting is her style. Again, women have to campaign very differently than men do, and it will be interesting to see if she is able to continue this momentum and is the key to taking on Donald Trump the way Nikki Haley has done it, which is not as much of a sort of bullyish attack the way Ron DeSantis has done, but actually more of a laying out here's who I am, here's what I will do, and here's why I'm different than the guy who is number one. And she's taken him on more than I think some of the men have, actually. Not quite naming the one who shall not be named, but actually taking him on a little bit more.
So speaking of the others who have tried to take him on, Ron DeSantis is someone who, when he first got in, barely took on Trump at all. Everyone was kind of waiting to see, was he going to do it, was he going to do it? He didn't until all of a sudden he started to lose, and now he is. The latest round of how this is going, let's just say it's not policy-oriented. Take a look.
This is no time for foot fetishes. We've got serious problems as a country. I know Donald Trump and a lot of his people have been focusing on things like footwear. I'll tell you this. If Donald Trump can summon the balls to show up to the debate, I'll wear a boot on my head.
And now their campaign is literally selling golf balls. Farnoosh.
How would you wear a boot on your head? That would be hard.
That's a really good point.
Sorry, I'm trying to make sense of this.
Casey Smith-Berman Supreme, who runs every 4 years in New Hampshire, does wear a boot on his head at every campaign event. He's literally been on the ballot for president more than often than not. So maybe Ron DeSantis could take some pointers from Berman Supreme.
But can we just, as a tall woman who has dated men who are a little bit shorter than me, and the ones,
I love this.
The ones who are comfortable with it, those are the guys that actually have some staying power. It's the ones who try to pretend or try to, the guy who wears a boot to be taller but says, I'm not wearing the boot to be taller, that's the guy you got to watch out for. And I'm telling you, women know exactly what's going on here.
Yeah. We spent years in boots and heels. We know.
Yes, we sure do. And this, of course, Nikki Haley was on with Charlemagne the God saying, like, well, I can run in my high heels, so, I think she
don't wear them if you can't run in them.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
She wins this round. All right.